The steppe wind howled across the plains of Mongolia, carrying with it the scent of blood and smoke. It was August of the year 1227. Beneath a gray sky, a procession of horsemen rode slowly across the desolate Gobi frontier, their faces wrapped in black veils, their armor streaked with dust and tears. In their midst lay a covered cart, its contents known only to a chosen few. The man inside was no ordinary warrior. He was Temujin, known to the world as Genghis Khan, conqueror of continents, destroyer of dynasties, and maker of an empire that had reshaped the known world. Yet now, the most feared man alive was dead, and the world would never be the same again. But the manner of his death, hidden behind layers of silence, secrecy, and lies, became one of history's greatest enigmas. The Mongols, bound by ancient oaths, vowed never to reveal where their Khan had fallen, nor where he was buried. For centuries, whispers echoed across Asia. Was he killed in battle? Did he die of illness? Was it betrayal or divine punishment? His passing was more than the death of a man. It was the death of an age. And as his heart ceased to beat beneath the endless Mongolian sky, the foundations of kingdoms trembled thousands of miles away. Because when Genghis Khan died, the empire he had built with fire and iron stood on the edge of chaos. In the years that followed, his death would unleash wars, revolts, and a struggle for power that would decide the fate of half the world. To understand how Genghis Khan's death changed the world, one must first remember how his life had remade it. Born around 1162 on the harsh Mongolian steppes, Temujin was not destined for greatness. He was born into a clan without power, abandoned by allies, hunted by enemies, and nearly starved as a child. But through the furnace of survival, he became something the steppe had never seen before: a unifier. He brought together tribes that had spent centuries tearing each other apart. He forged laws where chaos had reigned, and loyalty where betrayal had been a way of life. Under his banner, the Mongols became the deadliest force the world had ever known. From the Jin dynasty of northern China to the Khwarezmian Empire of Persia, entire civilizations bowed or burned before his horsemen. His armies rode further and faster than any before them, crossing deserts, mountains, and frozen rivers with terrifying precision. By the time of his death, Genghis Khan's empire stretched from the Yellow Sea to the Caspian, encompassing more than 12 million square miles. No single ruler in human history had ever commanded so much land or so many peoples. Yet for all his conquests, Genghis Khan's ambitions were not satisfied. His final campaign was against the Western Xia, a Tangut kingdom on the edge of China. The year was 1226 when the aging Khan rode once more into battle. He was nearly 65 years old, his body scarred from decades of war. Yet his mind remained sharp, and his will unbreakable. The Western Xia had defied him, refusing to send troops to aid his invasion of the Khwarezmian Empire. In the eyes of Genghis Khan, this was treachery, and treachery demanded annihilation. The campaign was brutal even by Mongol standards. Entire cities were razed, their inhabitants massacred. The Tangut capital, Ningxia, fell after months of siege. Chronicles speak of a slaughter so complete that no dog barked when the Mongols were done. But amidst the smoke and ruin of victory, something went terribly wrong. Accounts diverge. Some Persian sources claim the Khan fell from his horse, suffering internal injuries that never healed. Chinese historians suggest he was struck by an arrow during battle. Others whisper of a darker end, a Tangut princess who, taken captive, concealed a blade and fatally wounded the conqueror during the night. Yet the truth remains locked within the silence of his most trusted generals. Whatever the cause, by the summer of 1227, Genghis Khan was dying. The man who had commanded 1,000,000 horsemen could now barely lift his sword. His encampment, hidden in the mountains near the Liupan range, became a place of whispers and dread. The great Khan, who had terrified the world, now faced his own mortality. But even in his final hours, Genghis Khan's mind turned not to heaven, but to empire. He summoned his sons, Yochi, Chagatai, Ogadai, and Tolui. To each he spoke of loyalty, unity, and the eternal destiny of the Mongols. Yet beneath those words lay an unspoken fear. For he knew his sons were rivals, not brothers, and when he was gone, the empire might burn from within. The oldest, Yochi, had long been estranged from his father. Rumors had haunted him all his life, that he was not truly the Khan's son, but born of his mother's captor. Chagatai, fierce and prideful, despised Yochi and often challenged him openly. Ogadai, the third son, was wise and temperate, and perhaps the only one capable of holding their fragile unity together. Tolui, the youngest, was a warrior to his core, loyal but impulsive. As he lay dying, Genghis Khan chose Ogadai as his successor. It was a decision that would shape the destiny of the Mongol world and fracture it forever. The death of Genghis Khan was not announced immediately. The Mongols were in the midst of war, and their enemies could not know their divine ruler was gone. His body was wrapped in secrecy, his death concealed as the army continued its campaign. Messengers carried false orders in his name, ensuring no rumor reached the Tangut or the Chinese. Only when victory was absolute did the generals turn their horses north, carrying their fallen lord home. The funeral of Genghis Khan was like no other in history, and yet it left no trace. According to Mongol custom, his burial place was to remain secret for all eternity. The soldiers who escorted his body were said to have killed every living thing along their path, humans, animals, even birds in the sky, to preserve the mystery. When the grave was dug, the workers who prepared it were executed, and those who killed them were in turn slain. The earth swallowed the Khan's body, and the steppe returned to silence. No stone marked the site. No monument declared his name. Only the whisper of wind across the grasslands remained, as if the steppe itself had claimed its son. But the silence did not last. News of his death spread like wildfire, from the mountains of China to the bazaars of Samarkand, from the palaces of Persia to the courts of Europe. And everywhere the question rose, what would happen now? For while the man was gone, his armies still thundered across Asia. His generals commanded hundreds of thousands of soldiers. His sons each ruled vast lands, but the unity that had made the Mongols unstoppable, the fear and faith centered on one man, was gone. And in that void, ambition began to grow. The great empire that Genghis Khan had built through conquest and terror now faced its greatest enemy, its own bloodline. The question was no longer whether the Mongols could conquer the world, but whether they could hold it together. As the winds of the steppe howled over an unmarked grave, the fate of empires trembled on the edge of a blade. In the months after his death, his generals gathered in secret councils. Old rivalries surfaced. Alliances formed in the shadows. Armies were recalled, and emissaries rode from Karakoram to distant lands bearing sealed orders in the name of a dead emperor. Somewhere, beneath an unnamed mountain, the body of Genghis Khan lay silent, but his shadow still ruled the earth. And soon, the world would learn that death could not end his conquest, for the empire of the Mongols was about to explode outward again, more powerful, more ruthless, and more divided than ever before. The death of Genghis Khan had not brought peace. It had set the world on fire. The steppes were silent, but the world beyond them was not. From the frozen rivers of Rus to the burning sands of Persia, a storm was gathering. In the heart of that storm stood an empire without a master. The Khan was dead, yet his name still commanded the loyalty of millions. His banners still flew above conquered cities. His warriors still rode beneath his laws. But in the months following his death, the pulse of the Mongol Empire began to falter. For the first time since the tribes had been united under one ruler, there was no voice to command the horde. The iron discipline that Genghis Khan had forged began to bend under the weight of bloodlines and ambition. His sons, who had sworn to obey him in life, now stared at one another as rivals in death. And the question that haunted them all was one that would shape the fate of continents. Who would truly inherit the world that Genghis Khan had conquered? The year was 1228. Across the steppe, the smell of spring thaw mixed with smoke from countless campfires. At the center of this restless empire, a council of princes and generals gathered near the sacred mountain of Burkhan Khaldun, the place Genghis Khan had once called the heart of the Mongol spirit. They came to hold the Kurultai, the great assembly where a new Khan would be chosen. It was not a gathering of peace, but of tension. The air crackled with mistrust. The eldest surviving sons, Chagatai, Ogadai, and Tolui, stood divided, each flanked by loyal warriors and whispering advisors. Absent was Jochi, the eldest of all, who had died months earlier under uncertain circumstances. Many believed Genghis Khan himself had ordered his death. That absence left behind Jochi's son, Batu, a young but fierce prince whose lineage was tainted by old suspicions about his father's birth. Chagatai, the proud second son, was the natural warrior. His temper was infamous, his sense of honor unyielding. He believed the right to rule should pass to him. But Genghis Khan's dying command had been clear. His third son, Ogadai, was to inherit the throne. For days, the steppe resounded with debate. The tribal chieftains of every corner of the empire, Mongols, Turks, Tatars, and Uyghurs, argued and negotiated, each aligning with the prince who promised them the most. At night, the vast encampment glowed with 1,000 fires, and the sky above seemed to hold its breath. It was Tolui, the youngest, who finally broke the stalemate. He stood before the assembled warriors, holding a golden cup of fermented mare's milk. Raising it high, he declared, "My father's will must be honored. The empire he built shall not be divided by our pride." Then, in a gesture both humble and symbolic, Tolui poured the milk upon the ground, offering it to the spirit of Genghis Khan. "Let us be one empire under one Khan," he said, turning to Ogadai. The decision was made. Ogadai, the calm and pragmatic son, was proclaimed Great Khan of the Mongols. Drums thundered across the plain, and the warriors raised their bows in salute. The succession was complete, but the unity it promised was fragile. Beneath the ceremony lay bitterness that would one day ignite into civil war. Ogadai's reign began with both glory and burden. His father's empire stretched across lands too vast for any one man to control. In China, the defeated Jin dynasty still resisted in pockets of rebellion. In Central Asia, cities smoldered from recent conquest. To the west, distant kingdoms eyed the Mongols with terror and hatred. Ogadai's task was to hold together what his father had forged in conquest, and to prove himself worthy of the greatest empire in history. He began with order. From his new capital at Karakoram, Ogadai established systems of administration unknown to the nomadic past. He built roads, post stations, and a courier system that allowed messages to travel faster than ever before. Trade flourished across the Silk Road, and the empire's wealth grew. But even as the Mongols built, they could not stop conquering. Ogadai's generals, men like Subutai and Batu, were warriors bred in the shadow of Genghis Khan, and conquest was in their blood. They turned their eyes westward, to lands the old Khan had dreamed of but never reached, the mysterious realms of Europe. In 1236, the Mongol armies thundered into the Russian steppes. City after city fell, Ryazan, Vladimir, Moscow, all crushed beneath an unstoppable wave of horsemen. Subutai, now an aging but brilliant strategist, led the campaign with terrifying precision. Batu, grandson of Genghis Khan, commanded the vanguard, proving his lineage in blood. By 1241, the Mongols had reached the heart of Europe. Poland burned, Hungary fell, Vienna trembled. Across the continent, kings and popes whispered the same words. The horsemen of the apocalypse have come. To them, the Mongols were not men but monsters, ghosts sent by God to punish the sins of the world. But then, as suddenly as the invasion began, it stopped. The Mongol armies withdrew from Europe, retreating eastward. No one understood why. Cities that had braced for annihilation awoke to find the plains empty. The reason lay far from the battlefields of Europe. In the winter of 1241, news reached the Mongol encampment that shook the empire once again. Genghis Khan was dead. He had died unexpectedly in Karakoram, reportedly from heavy drinking. The news shattered the momentum of the Western campaign. Mongol law required that all princes return home to choose the next great Khan. The greatest invasion Europe had ever seen ended not by defeat, but by the death of a ruler. Yet his death did more than halt an army. It reopened the wounds of inheritance that Genghis Khan's death had only hidden, not healed. The power vacuum at the top of the Mongol world plunged the empire into years of chaos. Tolui's widow, Sorghaghtani Beki, a woman of extraordinary intelligence and cunning, maneuvered quietly behind the scenes. She positioned her sons, particularly Mongke and Kublai, for future rule. In the west, Batu established what would become the Golden Horde, an empire within the empire stretching across the Russian plains. The unity Genghis Khan had built through sheer will now splintered into factions bound by blood, but divided by ambition. By 1251, through careful alliance and the influence of Sorghaghtani, Mongke, grandson of Genghis Khan, ascended as Great Khan. His rise marked the last moment the Mongol Empire would stand under a single leader. Under Mongke, the Mongols once again turned toward conquest, this time to the Middle East. The Abbasid Caliphate in Baghdad, once the jewel of Islamic civilization, faced an army that moved like a living storm. In 1258, Mongke's brother, Hulagu Khan, led the assault that ended the caliphate's thousand-year rule. The city was sacked, its libraries burned, and the Tigris River ran black with ink and red with blood. It was one of the most catastrophic events in world history, a moment that symbolized the terrifying reach of Genghis Khan's legacy, even decades after his death. Yet even in triumph, the empire began to fracture beyond repair. Mongke died in 1259 during a campaign in China, and once more, the world of the Mongols fell into succession crisis. This time, the division would not end with a new great Khan. It would end with the shattering of the empire itself. In the east, Kublai, grandson of Genghis Khan, seized power and turned his focus to ruling China. In the west, his brother Hulagu claimed the lands of Persia. Batu's heirs ruled the vast Golden Horde in Russia. The unity of the Mongol Empire dissolved into four great khanates, each claiming to be the true inheritor of Genghis Khan's will, but each acting as its own kingdom. And so the greatest empire the world had ever known, forged in the vision of one man, began to tear itself apart from within. Yet Genghis Khan's death did not end with the fall of unity. His spirit endured, in trade routes that stitched together continents, in the transmission of ideas, in the mingling of cultures that his conquests had set in motion. Even as his descendants warred among themselves, the seeds of a new world were taking root. But those seeds would grow in ways no Mongol could have foreseen. For from the ruins of the empire, new powers would rise. Empires that owed their very existence to the man buried beneath an unmarked grave. The Mongols had conquered the world with fire. What came next would shape it with knowledge, commerce, and blood. The great empire of the Mongols had splintered, its unity shattered like a mirror reflecting too many faces of ambition. Yet even as the banners of Genghis Khan's descendants flew over separate lands, from the golden plains of Russia to the deserts of Persia and the palaces of China, his shadow loomed larger than ever before. Empires fall, kingdoms vanish, names fade, But Genghis Khan's death had set in motion something far greater than conquest. It had created the first truly connected world, a world where East met West not through chance, but through power, blood, and trade. The man who had once ruled by the sword now ruled by consequence. For in the century after his passing, the earth itself seemed to rearrange around the empire he had built, and the chaos he had left behind. Roads opened where none had existed, cultures intertwined, and the sparks of a new global age began to burn. The Mongols were gone, but the world they made was just beginning. In the east, the grandson of the great conqueror Kublai Khan rose to power. He was unlike any Mongol before him, educated, patient, and visionary. Where Genghis Khan had conquered by destruction, Kublai sought to rule by creation. He moved the Mongol capital from the windswept steppes to the heart of China, founding